Hello, lovely dance people, and welcome to David's Dance Podcast. I'm your host, David Evans, and today we are welcoming an amazing dance artist making diaspora dance theater that infuses breakdance and Afro-Latin dance and contemporary dance and explores themes such as feminism and sisterhood and identity and the immigrant experience. We are so pleased to welcome Ella Mesma. Ella, welcome.
Thank you, David Evans. I love that intro as well. What a perfectly worded description of the work.
Yeah, just trying to get a good little précis of exactly what your work is, because it really is so diverse. But before we jump into that, I really just want to start from the beginning. This is kind of a podcast tailored towards dance professionals and those hoping to get into dance and curious about the kind of dance journey. And so I really wanted to start at the very beginning and ask, how did you get into dance and why did you start dancing?
Sure. I'll try and give you like the short version. So I was quite a tomboy as a kid, and whether that was genuine or not, I was in a little trio of friends, and we all were tomboys. And you know how when you're a kid, like you do everything that they do, you do it too. So whether I actually was questionable.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't like dance, which was very questionable because I was always kind of taken the piss out of by them. Like if we went to like parties, I would always be the one on the dance floor, and then they'd be like, "But you don't like dance." And I was like, "Oh yeah," remember to put on that identity. And then two things happened. So at secondary school, one of my best friends' dad's partner was Brazilian, and so we started to go to. And this was quite young. They must have been kind of like somehow family friendly. But we used to go to these Brazilian events where I would see samba shows. At the time, I was quite shy, so I thought I would never ever do a samba show because they didn't wear very many clothes. And there was a lot of salsa, and I loved salsa. For me, it was like, I was 14 when I had my first salsa dance. I was like, this thing is amazing. And so that happened. And then I was drawing dances for A-level. Maybe it was GCSE dance, actually. I was doing it all the time, and eventually I was like, oh my God, I know why I'm doing this. I want to be one. And so I did AS level dance. I just did a year of dance at school. And I actually, from that, was asked to teach salsa at my school. So I was teaching kind of the younger people in my school. And then I went to university and did like a politics degree. I was still I was very much, had been told from young, you're going to get a good job and, this is the career path you have. But whilst doing that, I started to get paid to do salsa and samba shows and work.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was like, again, it's like all these little illusions kind of falling off of like, hang on a minute, I'm not doing the politics degree because I want to do it. I'm doing it because I've been told what to do. But actually what I love is dance. And so when I came out of uni, again, like magic coincidences happened. I met someone, I was teaching a workshop, and I met someone who invited me to this. It was called the National Dance Teachers Association, and it was kind of like a training course to teach, schools and so on. And out of that, I ended up doing an audition to apprentice for a dance company, a contemporary company called M&M. The director was Merville Jones, who was one of the founders of Phoenix. Didn't expect to get in at all because I didn't have, I'd had like this AS level year and I'd been doing the Contemporary Society at uni, but I got in.
Wow.
And yeah, it was like from there, it was like, okay, I'm doing this. There was definitely a lot of hurdles, but there was a moment when I realized if I don't go to a professional dance school, if I don't get that professional training, I'm gonna regret it for the rest of my life. So I started to kind of put the steps in place to just go for it and give it all of the love and all of the energy that I should have been doing from the age of 3, but it took me that long to really realize that this is what I meant to do with my life.
I think there's such a value though to being a late bloomer in dance, because I was also a late bloomer. I sort of danced quite a lot from kind of preteen onwards, but I went and did a art and philosophy degree, so I wasn't studying dance per se, but I was dancing every single day, and my artwork was about dance, and my philosophy dissertation was about the cognitive theory behind dance. And so everything was kind of coming slowly towards this. But I found when I went on to do extra study at Laban, like you say, because I was like, oh, I need to commit and get that extra foundation and training. It was, yeah, kind of a similar feeling where I felt like I had more conviction about it, as
Yeah,
opposed to if I had gone and done dance training when I was 18, which I think is the hardest thing, because doing
mm,
conservatoire level dance training is harder than doing a full-time job. And for a
yeah.
lot of,
Because not enough people know this. They always say, "Oh, you dance," so you just like fart around in the studio. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, actually, it's a really hard job.
yeah, and it's harder than a 9 to 5, because the reality is that you're getting there before class. In my case, I was driving an hour and a half each way to get there. And then, you dance 6 hours of that day, do all your classes, and then you have rehearsals in the evening. So the reality is that you're doing these crazy 12-hour days, and they're not easygoing days. You're fully focused and fully engaged throughout all of that. But I found, having done it later, I had sort of arrived at that conviction in a way that I saw a lot of maybe the 18-year-olds around me doing the bachelor's going, oh,
Yeah,
I'm not really sure if this is what I want to do. But you and I, we had gone and done the other stuff and
yeah,
go, oh, okay, I know this isn't where I want to go. I definitely want to do dance. So
yeah,
I would say that as an encouragement to people who are maybe think they're a little bit past the time of the sort of traditional timeline of a dancer,
mm.
that actually that conviction can be really helpful, and there certainly are pathways. Is there any advice you'd have for maybe other people who took an unconventional road or are considering an unconventional road into dance?
Sure. I think for me, the most powerful thing has been the focus. You know, like the
Mm,
power of how our focus creates our reality, how much when we put our mind to something, we can make it happen. And kind of like, I don't know if I want to use the word stubborn, but just don't give up on your dreams. You know, I think as a more mature dancer in training, there were people who had ideas about that's not the way and you're not going to make it. But I made it, and I think a massive part of that was like the energy. I couldn't not, I couldn't fail. You know what I mean? It was like I put everything on the line, so it was like this has to work. And there was something about that there were just all of these beautiful. And I think intuition comes in here as well. Like we both talked about, we were drawing dancers. You know, there were all these little signs. It's like our subconscious knew what it was we were supposed to do.
mm,
Um, so like following your intuition of is this right for me, and if it is, just giving it everything. And I find myself thinking about Cuban dancers because the way they train, they like so on it. They're so focused. They, you know, often in Cuba, you will be training on a concrete floor, but yet the level is just amazing. And it really makes me think of that, like giving it your everything, you know, just go for it. At the same time, my other bit of advice is about also looking after your health. Like I really resonated, David, you talking about driving an hour and a half and like those rehearsals at night. And for me, when I was doing my training, I hadn't actually finished making the money to pay for the course. So I was like juggling that bit as well. And there was just a massive burnout going on. So like, how can you look after yourself at the same time, and how can you put the right foods into your body? That just dance takes so many layers of care and self-care, and also working on the mind and knowing that you're doing a lot. So how can you be kind to yourself? And I think we can get such a kind of perfectionist behavior
mm,
because we are essentially perfecting our body. So how can you be kind to yourself at the same time on that journey?
mm. I think it was a little bit similar for me, where I found, and it does come from that passion and you wanting it so much, but taking on too much, where I was doing during training, also working Saturdays and Sundays. And so I was really doing like 70-hour weeks and just had crazy levels of burnout. It was just not safe at all. Fell asleep at the wheel. Like it was not good at all, really dangerous. And but it was just that kind of intensity. And actually, I kind of wish I had maybe split my course over 2 years, because
Mm,
one of the things that I would say is that dance, movement, all these things, it takes time for the body to digest those things and
totally.
for it to catch up with your ambition, so to speak. And I
And
saw a lot of the dancers who maybe took a bit more time and relaxed. I felt like all the ideas sort of percolated down a little bit more and were better integrated into their practice. And I had to do that eventually as well, but it was sort of after, yeah, it was sort of afterwards where I was like, okay, I need to digest all of this information. And how did you do that? So you went and did contemporary dance training, and you were training in break dance and salsa and these other forms. How did you start to sort of bring all these kind of quite disparate styles and elements together?
I think similar to you, I percolated, but I did actually have a proper burnout. So I went to Laban just like you a few years before, and I did it part time because I didn't have the money yet, and I also, I kind of loved my jobs, my life. So I was working pretty much full time in dance, using like a lot of Latin styles. So I was kind of doing a lot of like compresses and all that. I was really on that scene. Um, so I chose to do my training part time. And basically, the second year, I was like, I just can't handle this anymore. My body is not going to let me do it. I wasn't like, my memory. So I think the first year is like, I just told myself to do it, and it was like it just, everything kind of pulled together. But the second year of those weeks that you talked about, not having enough sleep, it was like suddenly I just couldn't. I didn't have a memory for dance. Like it was just everything was falling apart. So I actually, I kind of quit. I got offered this job. It was to play Jules in Roman Jules, the hip hop show in Turkey.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was like it saved my life. To
Mm,
be in a hot country under the sun. I think there's just something about sun and healing.
mm,
Be able to sleep again, and to know that I had enough money coming in, and I just freeze my love and time. So actually, and what I did was, because I knew this was all happening, I knew that like it didn't feel right. I did an audition for the place just before I left, and I found out while I was in Turkey that I got in, and that was much cheaper than Laban. It's crazy the prices of Laban. So so what I could do was I could take that money that I'd frozen for that year, and I was able to take it over to the place and just do a 1 year there. So it's quite interesting because it's like I had kind of 3 years of training.
mm.
Um, that second year was some training part time and this course. But I think this show that I was doing in Turkey. But I think the Turkey time, that's where I percolated, and so
Mm.
there was that. It's like our subconscious makes sense of things on such a different level. There's so much research on the power of sleep, and I always say, like in my company, go and sleep on it, because sometimes we overthink.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I think what you say about the need for process time, and I find this is very true as an artist as well, that with I need to sit with ideas, and that it is a little bit kind of like a slow cooked stew, where if you just leave it, have the ideas, and then just leave it to simmer, the flavors deepen. And it's the same thing going in there, but you just find that then when I come, often I'll have an idea and then I'll kind of sit on it for maybe 6 months. And then when I finally come to making the work, it's much deeper and I hit less kind of artist block because I've let those ideas kind of work down. And I think this is something that you do that's quite smart and is practical as well. But allowing breaks between creation, like we've done blocks of R&D and then there's been big
Mm,
spaces in between. And I think that's definitely been a strength of your work, because I feel like every time you need that time, so much happens in a 2 week rehearsal process where you're
yeah.
creating, that you need time to be able to sit back, look at it with fresh eyes, and just let those ideas kind of sit with you, I guess.
Mm.
Was there a moment, you've created a lot of great works over a range of different issues, and as you know, the choreographic process can change so much piece to piece depending on the material that you're working with. But was there a moment where you started to find your voice and started to feel like, oh, this is me, this is, either my style or the way that I wanted to be working. Was there a moment for you where you started to, or a piece that you started to feel like, oh, we found Ella Mesma?
I think there was, yeah. It was in 2014. I made a piece called Orishas, which David has definitely noticed. The Orishas feature really heavily in my work. So every single piece, we're working with those mythological characters and those ways of telling stories. I feel like they're
and
really
what are the Orishas for those who might not know?
good point. What are the Orishas? So the Orishas are deities or gods and goddesses, originally from Nigeria, but I learned about them actually in Brazil originally in 2004, and then a lot in Cuba as well. And each Orisha has a kind of a character, they have a colour, they have an element, so like earth, air, fire, water. They have their own pataki or story. So it's like each one you can kind of apply, you know how in Greek mythology you can often kind of use that story to tell a moral, also to apply to your life, and it's very similar with the Orishas. Yeah, so for me they're really very special. It's a very special way to be able to tell a story and to be able to kind of give that character on stage the personality and the kind of elements of, and often like as you know, David, I tend to work very much with who I have there and who they really are, but I really love to be able to connect that to an Orisha, because there's something about telling your story on stage but also taking it outside of yourself, and it having an element of truth and then an element of imagination, and really being able to kind of stretch that story. And I find that being able to step into a character who you relate to and connect to but is not you just allows for a lot more space.
I think why it's part of why it's so important for the context of your work as well. As Ella said, these are sort of West African deities, and because of the transatlantic slave trade, a lot of those same peoples are the peoples who ended up in Brazil and the Caribbean. So they took their gods with them, and so we see either Orisha dance or elements of it. It's sort of like a grandfather to a lot of dance in to a lot of African Latin dance in South America and in the Caribbean. And it's kind of a taking of the heritage and then finding a way to move forward with it. And I think it's something that your work also does very well, is looking back for inspiration and then finding a way that we can tell those stories for today and for today's context.
Yeah.
I think. In what way do you feel like those are helping you tell maybe stories or work with the context you're dealing with today as an artist?
Sure. So I think, like, in terms of the why did I want to do that? So, you know, as we've mentioned, I have these different kind of training areas, breaking. I didn't mention like how I got into that, but that was just before I went to dance school. Like, I took up something because I just wanted a complete change from being so much in the Latin world. And in the salsa and the samba world and in the breaking world, I felt quite boxed in, like you have to be that thing. And there was this kind of, these are the rules and you can't break them. And it's, you know, so I had a real respect for the old school. I love to train something to that like point where you know all the history and you can be, I'm quite a geek to be honest. But at the same time, there just always felt like, actually we also need to look forwards and we also need to be progressive, and I do think, I feel this somehow comes back to this thing of being mixed heritage and being like a bit of a mixture of everything, and that my dance styles were like this bit of a mixture of everything. And then does that mean that you're not good, you know, this master of all trades, what is it, master of all trades,
jack of all trades, master of none. I'd like to be a master of all trades. That sounds good too.
Master of all. But yeah, so it was like, well, I don't feel like I'm a jack of all trades because I've very specifically trained in these styles, but I don't want it to be one thing. I want to bring all of this in, because for me, like when I was in Russell Malafont Company, Russell's wife, Dana, she always used to whisper to me, Ella, dance. And when she'd say that, it was like this whole thing happened where I went back to my Afro-Cuban roots and my spine started moving, and I stopped being so like, when I was training, it was kind of like contemporary is this, and your arms is quite strict and straight, and then breaking, it's this energy. And suddenly when she would say that to me, it's like I would go, oh yes, it's about how do I move in my body using the tools that I have. And so I suppose the linking this back to the Orishas and this kind of bringing the modern, it's like how can we pay our respects? How can we look backwards but turn forwards? How can we honor everything that's come before, all of that wisdom? Because I feel like there's a lot of wisdom that we've also lost in our society today, but whilst also being in the present and not kind of like harping on about the olden days when things were good. You know what I mean? Really standing now in this space, and also looking forwards in terms of what is it we want to change, and what can we bring, how can we learn from the past, but also offer new solutions, new horizons, new possibilities.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's so true. I've had that moment too of trying to put choreography together with myself or with other dancers, and then you watch it back and you realize you become sucked in just maybe too much into the mechanics of the movement, and you need to go back and say, let's do it again, but let's dance it. Just exactly like you said, like I've thought or used those words because sometimes you're like, okay, but now feel it. And that's something that I think is really great about your work and your process. It comes out in the end process and the end product, but people might not necessarily know is that you work from such a kind of emotional place and starting from a character and a story place. And I sort of, when people ask me like jokingly, like, how does Ella work? I'll often be like, Ella starts with make me cry, and then we'll go from there. And it's sort of a bit like, but in a very real way, let's start with the real emotion, and we need to feel it, because you can't tack it on at the end. It doesn't work. And when you try to hit it on at the end, the emotion just slides right off. But if you start with a beautiful kind of emotional and relationally focused epicenter, then you can start to craft the movement around it so it can maybe articulate that idea. And I've never asked you this, but how did you arrive at that process? Was that just intuitive for you, or did you see that as a choreographic process and go, oh, that's how I want to work? How was that for you?
I think it was a bit of both. A lot of it was born out of frustration, actually working for other choreographers and feeling like we were doing it the other way. And like you said, like I would do it as the dancer. I would put the emotion on and I would make up what the storyline was, and I would like bring this stuff to the stage. But I was like, but my story is completely different. Actually, I'm thinking of one specific performance, which perhaps I won't mention what it's called, but it was about protest, and I like at the time was quite angry at what was going on in South America, and so I was bringing this story to it, and I just felt like, but we should know if we're dancing together on stage, we should know what this story is and that we're in this together. And like if there's power and energy, or if there's sisterhood, we need to feel that and we need to have gone on that journey. So for me, like it really started with Ladylike. Ladylike was such an emotional journey because the topics were so personal to the people involved, and we were all like, we were in pain. It was like this healing journey. So there was this, like when we performed that piece, there was always genuine tears, and it was like, I love you. I wanted to swear them, but I didn't. I love you so much. There was so much genuine sisterhood and care on that stage, and like we genuinely were those warriors, like fighting the world as a collective. So there was partly that. And then the other thing was about care in the studio. Like I also felt like often people, when I was performing, they wanted to kind of like put your story on stage, but it was like, okay, puke up your story and go home. And there wasn't this like genuine care and like real interest in the healing of that person, or like, well, you're going through this, so how can we also help you? What do you need? And so I really wanted to make a company where that was the kind of the family and the earth, the grounding together was the the core, like that's where it starts from. And almost like then it doesn't really matter if the work is good or not, because we've got this. But as a result of doing that, the work kind of can't not be good, because there's so much. I have a friend from Portugal. He talks about it's actually, I think it's, is it Brecht? He says about art should be like a hammer, because you shape the world you want to see with a hammer, and like this crafting of the art and this like care, because like you said, often we make the work over a really long period of time, not always by choice, partly because I've always applied for those quite small grants, which means like you've got 2 weeks and then it's like, okay, now I've got to write a whole new application. So I am writing my first big bid at the moment, actually, which is one of those. But yeah, so like, that much time and that much care does kind of mean that it's guaranteed that there's going to be a hell of a lot of blood, sweat and tears and love in the show.
I think you're touching on something which is easily missed, which is dance is about people. If you went to a dance show and it was all robots doing the same, androids doing the same beautiful movements, probably flicking their legs even higher, would it be just as spectacular? Probably not, because I think the most important element of dance is the human element, which is what you have absolutely hit on the head, which is all this movement and choreography can be beautiful, but if it doesn't come from a sort of human place, and that human place is already there because you're putting a person on stage, so you don't have to create the humanness of it, it's there. But in acknowledging it in the process, you start to be able to understand it and kind of create work that has a bit more of the humanness kind of acknowledged at the center of it. It's something that I struggle to see in contemporary dance a lot, because I think contemporary dance can be quite architectural at times and quite maybe existentialist. So I think, and that's part of it, the kind of maybe ideologies and kind of attitudes to the human experience that it's dealing with. But I think it's really great when you see work and you see not just a dancer on stage, but you see a person on stage.
Totally. I don't even care about technique, I realise. I like seeing human beings dancing from their heart. I'm not, like, it's not for me about, their legs high. It's like, they're dancing and they love it. I love to see that. When, like you said, when it's like they're dancing it, it's just so joyful to watch.
And it's the joy of intention as well, clarity of intention, because I find when the performer is clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it, and doing it with genuine gusto, as an audience member, you don't really need to actually understand the piece. We spend a lot of time asking, what was that about? What was that piece about? And I find when work is really like, when the dancers are really like emotionally engaged in what they're doing, I don't really need to understand. It's just beautiful. And this is how I always feel like, like if I need to cry, I'll just look up like hakas online, like funeral haka or like wedding haka. Haka, for those who don't know, is the dance form that came from the Maori, the indigenous Polynesian people of New Zealand. And it serves a lot of different purposes, but you don't need to understand the words of the haka. It's the intensity in the actions that so many people see that form of dance and just say, I know nothing about this, and like I'm so emotionally struck by it. And I think it's such a really great thing to be kind of getting back to in dance, because we need to see people a little bit more. I think I don't think the sort of there is definitely a place for maybe more architectural forms of dance.
Yeah, I'm a little bit in love with Ray McGregor, who are pretty architectural, but I do think, like, I just did their reset workshops, and it was like, it's just so satisfying to be super uber technical sometimes. Not that I'm saying I'm naturally uber technical dancer, but I really appreciate it. But I did also find myself sometimes being like, but why are we doing this? Like, but why? Because it's like there's two sides, isn't it, to what it is that we want to see on stage. And yeah, for me passion. Oh, it's just, yeah, you can't beat seeing passion on stage.
For those who want to connect with you more, you're also doing some coaching now. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So that really came out of, like I mentioned earlier, about this. I really think we have to work on ourselves, and having done the work, the change now of how I experience life versus before I did the work. Yeah, so I began about 5 years ago, kind of to do coaching, to be being coached, start to understand my beliefs. So I had a massive, I still do have, it doesn't mean that it all goes away, but I know how to work with it now, a not belonging belief, a kind of imposter syndrome belief. Just come a lot out of like my life experience and kind of my family's background, but also, dancing late, for example, it's quite easy to think, oh well, I'm not, they're all dancing since they were three, but I'm not, have these storylines. And what I learned over this 5 year process was to stop being the victim and to start being the hero, and to start creating the life that I wanted to really create. I mean, I was doing it anyway, but just to really work consciously with that. So yeah, I offer coaching for creatives. I have found that for me, it's brought the work that I want to do to me. It's helped me to really think about what it is I want to do, and to have the confidence to go for it, rather than, maybe sitting at home and waiting for it to come to me, or doing the audition and not getting it and thinking that that means I'm not good enough. Actually, I've really learned to just go out and make it happen, and ask for, and step up to, and yeah, live the life I want to live. So if anyone is interested in coaching, then please let me know. It would be a pleasure to go on that journey with you, and to really help you to elevate and live the life of your dreams.
And what kind of people should come to you to coach? Is it, I'm a choreographer and I'm stuck on this idea, or I don't know my next career step? What sort of advice and what sort of ways are you trying to help people move forward?
Sure. So I always say I'm not giving advice. We're working together. Like it's a kind of a healing journey, but that you're the healer, and that you're coming and we're figuring out that understanding. So I work with the idea of we will have our lead, we will have our stories, we will have our beliefs, and that often those are illusions. So how can we understand what they are, and then separate from that our creative potential, our creative reality, and our power as a human being, our genius? How can we work with that?
Oh, we just lost your video for a second. There we go.
Yeah, that was that alert message on the phone coming up. Yeah, so how can you work with those two things, but choose the higher vibration? So it might be that someone is feeling like they've got a block, like, maybe it's like a dance block where they're going to auditions and they're not getting them, or maybe it's like more like they're like, I don't believe in myself. For example, someone might say, I got through to the final round and then all I had to do was send in the video, but I didn't do it. So it's like self-sabotaging. So helping people kind of work with those kinds of ideas. Or then on a bigger scale, maybe it's like, actually, I want to take over the world. Someone did say that to me the other day. I loved it. It's like, yes, take over the world. How can, what are the blocks getting in the way? Is it kind of money beliefs? Like, what are the beliefs and the stuff getting in the way of really going for it? And then, yeah, stepping up to yourself, stepping up for yourself, and living. I think often people have this idea of, when I am perfect, then I can. When I am rich, then I can. And so we kind of like live a version of our life that's on hold, waiting for the moment, the perfect moment. And so it's helping people to really step up to living that life now and go for it with what they would love.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. It's definitely sounds like a great process of looking in and introspection in order to find kind of a way to move forward. Where can people, if people want to find out more about coaching, where's the best place to follow up and connect with you?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to find me is Ella Mesma on everything, like across Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. But I do have a website for just specifically for the coaching work, which is, I'm going to spell it. I'm going to say it once and then I'll spell it. People keep on calling it Maya Agenda, which I love. It's Maya Gandaya. So that's Maya, Maya, and then Gandaya, which is actually Portuguese for joy, GANDAIA.com.
Great. And we'll put a link in the description below.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, I think we'll take a pause there. I just want to thank you, Ella, for all your lovely words of wisdom. It's so nice to just take time to stop and connect with you, especially in these hectic and crazy times.
So we should be on a tour right now, David and I. We should be touring an amazing show. Like they're finally after that slow process. But no, we paused again. So yeah, I can't wait to get back on the road as well with that show and with you.
Exactly.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Ella, and lovely listeners. I've been David Evans. You can follow me on Dance Across Mediums, and we'll see you next week.